Good evening, everybody. It's great that you could join us. We're going to get started right away. I'm Rawlson King, City Councillor for Rita Rockcliffe, and I'd like to welcome you to this virtual information session concerning the proposed development at 149 King George Street in Overbook, which we know is at the corner of Quill and King George Street facing the Overbook Community Centre. This meeting is designed to provide community members with an opportunity to learn about the planning process, as well as to provide the applicant with an opportunity to provide information concerning the proposed development. We want to inform you that we will be recording this session and that it will be placed on my YouTube channel for reference. So if you do not want to appear on camera, we ask you to keep your video off. At the end of the presentation, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. And we also did receive some questions which we had referred to staff. And so we'll be able to go through those. But at the end of the presentation, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. But until that time, we ask you to remain muted until we entertain questions so that there's just clarity on the call. If you wish to ask a question at that time, we'll ask you that you raise your virtual hand using the tools provided by Zoom. And I will be beginning with a brief presentation, which will provide an overview of the development process at 149 King George, and will then provide the applicant the opportunity to present. So I'll just ask my staff to launch my presentation now so that we can go through those slides and detail the process. So the development that is proposed at 149 King George Street is going to undertake a spec process, and that starts with the heritage application that is reviewed by the Built Heritage Committee. If that application is approved, it rises to council for final approval. The next step is for the applicant then to apply for a minor variance, which is reviewed by the Committee of Adjustment. Next slide. It's important to note that the former Overbook Public School will not be altered through this application. The new construction, as proposed, will be 3 stories in height, clad primarily in red brick and located approximately 9 meters away from the school building. Next slide. The new construction, as proposed, has been sited to ensure visibility of the designated building from the corner of King George Street and Quill Street, which is a heritage attribute of the property. Next slide. It's important to note that under the Ontario Heritage Act, changes to designated heritage properties require the approval of the City of Ottawa. An application for a permit under the Ontario Heritage Act is required when the scope of work includes demolition, new construction in a heritage conservation district, or alterations that are required to go to the Built Heritage Committee and City Council for approval. This application deals with an alteration, and it's a small alteration to the existing heritage designation. City approval is required before any work on a heritage property can be undertaken, and which might affect its heritage attributes. Next slide. So the Built Heritage Committee will only consider the heritage application as specified under the Ontario Heritage Act at its meeting next week, January 16th, 2024. It's important to note, therefore, that that meeting will not deal with planning issues per se. The planning aspects are dealt with the Committee of Adjustment. So we wouldn't be talking about those types of planning items or talking about transit or transportation impacts as example. The jurisdiction of the Heritage Committee is very prescribed, and it will just be specifically looking at the heritage attributes, and it needs to consider this within a specific timeline, and that timeline expires February 12th, 2024. The application will then rise to City Council if approved by the committee for consideration on January 24th. Next slide. So as I had stated before, the planning considerations are by way of a minor variance, and those would be considered and decided by the Committee of Adjustment, which does many considerations around variances, or that's its key jurisdiction, and it does many of these in Overbook. So the planning component will not specifically rise to council. It will be dealt with by the Committee of Adjustment. And that's if the proposed heritage application ultimately is approved both by Built Heritage Committee and City Council. It's important to note that a minor variance is a minor change to a performance standard under the zoning bylaw granted by the Committee of Adjustment. Next slide. A minor variance cannot add a use that is not permitted under the zoning bylaw. So it's primarily designed to change either the maximum building height, the minimum lot area or width, the distance between the lot line and the building, minimum landscape requirements, and parking and loading facilities. So those are the items that would actually be considered at Committee of Adjustment. Next slide. In terms of participating in the process, residents and community organizations can provide written comment or undertake a public delegation concerning the heritage application by contacting Melanie Blais, who's the acting committee coordinator for the Built Heritage Committee. And I've left those details in the slide, and we'll also provide that information in the chat. And if the heritage application is approved and the applicant continues with a minor variance, the applicant will install a notification sign on the lands affected by the proposed minor variance. And the Committee of Adjustment will then assign a hearing date and notify all property owners within 60 meters of the property of the application. So there will be public signage, as you've seen with the white, green, and blue boards that come from the planning department that provide some information that there will be a continuing process. And not unlike the letters that many residents had received within the 60 meters of the subject property for the heritage application, there will be continued correspondence from the planning department with the residents and with the community association. And I believe that's the last slide for my, there's one more. So these are the other items that will be undertaken with this proposal. So the proposal requires a consent application to sever the lot containing the school from the proposed townhouse dwellings, and severance to create a separate ownership for each unit. And in order to ensure that the heritage permit application is consistent with relevant planning policies and considerations, heritage staff are recommending a heritage permit be conditional upon approval from the Committee of Adjustment. As we know, there hasn't been a date set for that meeting because it has to go to Heritage Committee first for deliberation on the heritage application. If approved, the heritage permit has a 2-year expiry date from the date of issuance. And I believe that was the last slide. So now I'll invite the applicant team to talk to the specific application. And we do have 3 representatives from that team: Allison Clark, Peter Hume, and Mike Vieira. So I will turn over the presentation at this time to them. And if you can, Aaron, it'd be great to get their slides up so that they can proceed with their presentation.
Thank you so much, Councillor King, for that brief introduction. And thank you to his office for pulling together this meeting, and thank you all for joining this evening from the community. As Councillor King mentioned, my name is Allison Clark, and I'm joined by my colleagues on this file, Peter Hume and Mike Vieira. Peter and I are overseeing the project management of this proposed development, while Mike is responsible for the design. Some of this information that you're about to hear may be duplicate based on Councillor King's very informative presentation, so I apologize for that, but we'll cover the bases. I'll provide a brief overview of the property and its owners. We'll walk through the overall design of the development and cover the applications required to proceed. We'll wrap up with the timing, and then we'd be happy to hear any comments or questions from the community. Next slide, please. The subject property is located at 149 King George and is owned by a company called Vinci Education. Vinci Education is a global company providing educational services to families with children from infant age to school age. They presently serve over 50,000 young children worldwide and have schools located in various countries. Today, Vinci Education runs a school out of the historic former Overbook School located on the subject property. The site is a large property, rectangular in shape, and a vacant portion of the property exists fronting onto Quill Street and bordered by King George and Glynn Avenue. This vacant portion of land is where the proposed development is situated, and as Councillor King mentioned, there's no alterations proposed to the historic building on site. Next slide, please. The proposed development would be well served by the existing amenities in the area. Most notably, of course, would be directly across the street with the Overbook Community Center and the Overbook Park. We believe this is an excellent location for a small, appropriately sized infill development for that reason. Next slide, please. Peter will touch on the required applications to proceed, but if approved, the development would see the construction of 8 3-story townhomes. These townhomes would be for sale product, They are designed as small urban style townhomes with rear yards and work from home spaces. Facade includes lots of windows and balconies for street facing engagement. And on this slide, you can see the proposed site plan. I'm now going to pass it over to Mike Vieira of Evolution Design and Drafting to touch on the proposed design.
Okay, thank you, Allison. Appreciate it. So I guess I'll wait for the next slide here to switch over. Okay, excellent. So this is the general facade. You can kind of see the entire townhouse block as a whole. We took note during the design process, in looking at the school, and it was obviously predominantly a brick facade. It sort of had these punched single hung windows. And given that the facade was generally flat, your eyes were kind of drawn to either the entrances in the school, which were accentuated with either bump outs or sill and header details, and or the roof line at the top of the school, which was accentuated with a little cornice detail. So we definitely paid homage to that with this design proposal, and that we sort of wanted to tap into those features as well. So the facade is predominantly a red brick. We didn't want to go exactly this exact same colors as school. We do want to sort of differentiate from it a little bit, but definitely tie into the fact that the school is predominantly red brick, and we have proposed such materials here as well. It's also in addition to a faux metal wood siding, which is really just to tie into the landscaping at the front yards, the trees. A more softer material, however, with lower maintenance, which is why we proposed metal. So it's going to look like wood, but be made out of metal. As far as the how the massing works, so again, tying into how we wanted it to connect with the school. Although the school has a flat roof, we did have a slope roof here, which was just more functional for what we were trying to do. But that in itself does draw your eyes to the upper line of the design. But we further accentuated that with some bracket details. And we created these vertical bump outs as well, just to create a vertical line that once again brought your eyes to the top roof line, similar to what's happening at the school. And then obviously we accentuated the entries as well, similar to the school. So the school had bump outs at the entries. So we sort of incorporated that here as well, so that your eyes are drawn to the main entrances of each dwelling. And similar to the school, where there were headers and sills proposed around the windows, we have done that here as well. The middle window portion that you see, which is sort of the punched window look, which is seen throughout the entire school, we incorporated that detail here as well and further accentuated it by sort of creating a perimeter picture frame bump out, just to kind of really hit home that it's sort of a punched window look tying into the school. So that is the general facade here. We can go to the next slide, I believe is the close-up. So yeah, so this is a little more of a close-up so we can get a better sense of the details and the materials being used. When looking from the front, the facade is predominantly brick and the faux metal siding, but as we sort of extend to the sides of the building and even at the upper rooftop little amenity areas, it does become a gray siding material. So there's 3 materials total, but the predominant side on Quill Street is what we see here. As mentioned previously, this has very high engagement facing Quill Street, where the majority of the windows do face Quill Street and or the back of the building in this case. And we've reduced some of the windows facing the side streets on the corner yards, but that is the look here. You can go to the next slide. Nope, a little more close up this one. So that's okay, we can stay here. So just to talk a little bit more about some of the design features. So every unit does have this front porch. So, you can probably fit a single chair there just for somebody to sit down or have a little more interaction with the front street. You will have taken note of the little private amenity areas that are on the 3rd story level. Part of the design direction with this was that we did have some restrictions from a design viewpoint as far as the building depth. And so we had to make up for that by moving where living spaces would typically be. So with this proposal, the lower level is where the office space and a small bedroom would be located, while the other bedrooms are located on the 2nd story level. And then the living space in these residences are located on the 3rd story level. So that's the living room, kitchen, and dining. And of course, that is where we have chosen to place the majority of windows and also increase their sizes. Additionally, these balconies, of course, face the park that is straight ahead. So obviously, we were trying to take advantage of some of these sight lines and views. So this area really easily accommodates a small table, a couple chairs. So it's an amenity space that a family can use, which is the intent of these dwellings. They were designed for a family dwelling. They are 3-bedroom units. So go to the next slide. Okay, so towards the back, we simplify the facade. So we do have engagement on the corner side, so on the 2 ends of the building. So we did continue the brick line just to sort of carry it through. And then, of course, on the side facing the school, we did simplify things a little more. Some of the windows we see here, so in the upper story, we're looking at the living room location there. In the 2nd story, we're looking at, I believe it's the master bedroom. And then beneath that, we're looking at the office space. It was important during the design because this was geared not only to be a property that's being sold to a family, but for family usage. So it was very important that we incorporated some sort of rear yard amenity. So it does accommodate a small table, a couple chairs. We're showing a little barbecue here. This is all just sort of for scale, so you can see how the space can be used. But that is the general feel here for the rear and the sides. I believe, is that the last slide? Excellent. So this side here, again, just showing that sort of corner yard engagement with the school, where we sort of brought the materials up to a certain extent, but then terminated them to simplify things. But more importantly is the position of the building here. It was decided in conjunction and discussions with the heritage staff to sort of push the building back. So that the building massing is more in line with the school itself. Now, although our proposal is for a 3-story townhouse, massing wise, it's still going to be very much in line or similar height to the school, just simply because the school has higher framing heights than the townhouse. So from a massing perspective, it really is going to sort of line up with it quite well. And that's all I need to say there in regards to that. Okay, so I'll turn it over to Peter. I think he's the next person who's going to be discussing here.
Yes, thank you very much, Mike, for walking us through the design. So this is, as in every infill development, has unique characteristics with respect to the applications that they have to deal with in getting from project conception to actually getting a building permit. So because the entire school property is part of a designation with respect to the Ontario Heritage Act, we had to apply to amend that that designation, not because the playground was and the parking spaces were actually part of the designation, but more because of the relationship that the corner sight lines provide. So when you're standing and you're looking at the front entrance to the buildings, we have to. That's an important sight line in the heritage, as part of the heritage attributes. So because we're making some changes to that, we're adding a building. We have to go through a heritage exercise, and we retained heritage consultant to look at the design that we originally proposed. And in fact, they made some changes to the site plan to accommodate the heritage aspects of the school, and we'll talk about that in a little more when we get to the consent application. But the locations of the buildings, when you look at them, you would think that they would be squarely in the middle of the proposed property. We had to move them to create a wider view plane to the front of the school. In order to preserve sort of the heritage view planes, we had to move our buildings. And unfortunately, that as we move them, when we had space to move them, lucky enough, but it will require another minor variance, which we'll discuss when we get to our minor variance applications. If you go to the next slide. So and this is where you see that wider setback. The normal side yard setback for a property like this would be 4.5 meters. We're almost 7.55 meters, almost exactly in line with the front wall of the school, which I think is 7.56, maybe just a little bit infinitesimally back from that. But that's where the heritage experts indicated that we had to provide the building, and in accommodating the change, we did that. Unfortunately, it results, when you look on the other end, with a requirement for a minor variance on the northern side of the property, where you normally see 4.5 meters, you're actually seeing 1.59. So let's go to the next slide. So in order to create lots, there are two real processes to create lots in the Planning Act. One is what's called by part lot control, and the other is by a consent application or a severance application to the Committee of Adjustment. Now, in order to use the part lot control process, your lot has to be a lot on a plan of subdivision. And in a lot of these cases, these lots weren't laid out and they weren't on a plan of subdivision. And when they're not on a plan of subdivision, you have to actually go to the Committee of Adjustment and sever the individual lots off. So what we would do is we would sever, or what the proposal is now is to sever parts 4 through 18 or 4 through 19 from part 1. So part 1 is the retained land, it's the school, and then you can see the individual lots that are created to allow for individuals to own each of the townhouses that will be constructed on the former, I guess there's a small park there, or a small school playground, and the parking spaces. So we don't have a date for the Committee of Adjustment because we haven't applied. We were waiting to finish the heritage process, and to these are severing these properties is quite complex, and we're still working out some of the sort of the planning details that would guide the severance. What you're seeing on when you look at them, you see, you know, parts 4 down to part 18. Those are actually part of the lots. When you see the little part at the back, we identify those small parts as easements. So if you own part 9 and 10 in the middle of the block, and you need to get back into your backyard with a barbecue or a lawnmower, you have an easement across your neighbor's lawn to get back to your property to undertake maintenance and to do other things. So what you'll see is an application to create a number of lots with the requisite easements that will allow neighbors to cross and to get to their backyards to do whatever they need to do in that backyard. So companion to consent applications, to the severance applications, are going to be an application for minor variances. So if we want to go to the next slide. So as we're creating the lots, you know, the ideal scenario is that each lot is zoning compliant. And unfortunately, in this case for us, the lots aren't going to be zoning compliant in a number of areas. First of all, and some of these are works in progress. So I will say right now we think that we need a rear yard variance. The requirements of the zoning bylaw require you to have a 25% rear yard, which in this case would be 5.6 meters. But the rear, and we're providing a rear yard of 4.6, which when we looked around the community, we did see some smaller rear yards that we could sort of indicate was could have been a fabric in the community. Now we are doing some zoning research on this because the uniqueness of this property means that right now we think we need a variance. We may not ultimately need a variance given some of the peculiarities of the zoning bylaw. And I'll say the zoning bylaw, for instance, requires you to have, as I said, 25% of the rear yard as a setback. But there's also a portion of the zoning bylaw that says if you have all your front doors facing the long side of a corner or through lot, you only have to have a rear yard of 4 meters. And so there's the zoning bylaw is a very complex and very detailed document, and there's always some interpretation issues. So right now we need a variance. We're seeking some clarity on which part of the zoning bylaw actually applies. But right now we think we need a variance. But it may turn out, depending on the interpretation, we actually may be zoning compliant in the rear yard. In the area that we're not, and we know we won't be, is that the zoning bylaw for this particular property allows townhomes, and it as a use, and it does allow the lot width that we have is appropriate and conforming to the zoning bylaw, but the lot area actually doesn't, because the lots are going to be a little smaller. Not all of the lots, lot 18 and 17, conform to the zoning bylaw. Part 4 and part 3 at the top, part 2, 3, and 4 would comprise 176.8 square meters, where you're required to have 180. Those are very, one of them conforms and the other is very close. It's the lots in between, 6 parts 6 through 16, where we think, where we know that we're going to have to seek a minor variance to allow for a lot area of less than 180 square meters. We're anticipating that those are going to be in the range of 138.5 square meters, each of those lots. The lot lines aren't necessarily straight, so some of them will be 138.5, some of them may be 138.25. So, but at this point, for the purposes of this presentation, to understand that we will need minor variances, and the quantum will be in the range of 138.5 square meters. And the last variance we think we need is going to be the corner side yard provision at the top of the it would be the north end of the property. As we moved the buildings to create that sight line from Quill and King George, the corner there, we did so in resulted in a smaller side yard. So we will be seeking a minor variance to create that side yard, which moves from 4.5 meters to 1.55 meters on that side. Now, we will though we will have a rear yard. So if you're walking down the street and you're looking at it, you'll see a rear yard and a front yard. So it shouldn't be as drastic a change to the streetscape as you might think in that area. And I think that we're actually going to be required to, as part of this application, to construct a sidewalk on Glen Avenue. So there will be activity along that that side yard. So those, I think, are the applications that we're going to be required to make. Heritage, which we're going to next week, and once we get through that hurdle, we'll be looking to finalize and submit our consent application and our minor variance application. So back to you, Allison.
Thank you,
Thank
Peter.
you.
And Allison.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was just going to say that we're all done and we're ready to open up the floor. So nothing
I
from
was
our end right now.
going to just briefly say before we open up the floor that staff sends apologies. They weren't able to attend tonight. So Heritage staff specifically around this item, of course, as we had noted, if minor variances are required, and definitely if the consent application is required, that will go to committee of adjustment. As you might know, that jurisdiction is separate from council, and that is a jurisdiction that deals with many applications that are brought in Overbook because of the existing zoning bylaw application in Overbook. But unfortunately, staff couldn't be here because of the time. Now, they aren't obligated under the Heritage Act to engage in this information session, but they would have if they were available. They were not, but staff did want to provide the rationale for their recommendations. And one of the rationale for recommending approval, and this is staff, Heritage Planning staff recommending approval, is that the town houses have been designed to respect the former Overbook Public School in terms of material, design, and datum lines. Red brick will be used to reflect the materiality of the school, and the windows are inspired by the wall to window pattern on the historic building. Additionally, the banding and horizontality of the townhouses relate to the cornice on the former Overbook Public School. And number two, the heritage attributes of the former Overbook Public School will not be impacted. No changes are proposed to the actual building, and the new construction has been sensitively cited to ensure the historic building remains a local landmark when viewed from King George and Quill Streets. In terms of the second second recommendation, it notes that staff notes that what they're really doing is amending the property's cultural heritage value as described in documentation. So they will be removing the statement and attribute about the school building being located on the corner. Through the proposal, the former Overbook Public School will no longer be situated on the corner, as the new townhouses will be constructed on Quill Street. However, the building will remain a landmark in the community. So those would be the changes, the proposed amendments to clarifying the statement of cultural heritage value and attributes to basically accommodate the proposed development. And now I think that we can move on to questions, and I think we can have the capacity to ask questions to both the applicant team who is here, as well as myself in a political capacity. Maybe what we'll do is we will take questions from the floor first, so raised hands in Zoom, and then we will also scour the meeting chat to ask some questions of the applicants that way as well. So let's take some questions from the floor first, and then we will review some of the questions that are in the meeting chat. So we'll just ask if anybody does have any questions, they should be able to raise their hands and also start their video. And I think we can start with Mercedes. She's first in line.
Hey, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I am a resident in Overbook. I've been living here for 9 years. Full disclosure, I'm also a parent of one child at Vincy. I used to have 2 children at Vincy, and the older one is now in public school. I think most parents in the school are very concerned about the implications of this project on the school. One of them being the schoolyard. What's going to happen with the kids? Right now, this is the area where kids play every day. And it's not clear to us where the kids are going to be playing if this project goes ahead. And I think I saw a lot of really good questions in the chat about what's going to happen with construction, the yards being so close to the proposed schoolyard. So I was hoping that the developers could speak a little bit about what in their proposal, what they're planning to do in terms of play yard space.
So
Thank you.
maybe I can tell that it's going to be for the school to tell you how they're going to reorient their space to accommodate the schoolyard. What we've been asked to do and what we've been required to demonstrate to the city at this point is that the spaces that are the spaces around the school that remain after the severance are enough to meet the ministry guidelines or the ministry requirements. And we have and we can demonstrate that there is space to meet the ministry requirements. How Vincy chooses to restructure those spaces in yards is going to be something that they're going to have to discuss with you. They haven't said to us that, you know, we're at this point that they're restructuring this part of the area to be a sandbox and things like that. So that'll be something that Vincy will have to convey to the parents and the students. But what we can tell you is that there is enough space around the building to meet the ministry requirements that are the school is required to meet for its licensing requirements.
Thank you for that answer. And I think Robin is the next person with her hand raised.
Hi. Can you hear me?
We can.
Mhm.
Please go ahead.
Okay. I just echo what Mercedes just spoke to. I'm also a parent with a child at Vinci and was going to send my son there next year and maybe stay there for kindergarten too. We're concerned for me, a big part of it was with just how we found out this is the owners of Vinci that are initiating this project. Like I found this out from a neighbor who has no connection to the school. It felt very just didn't feel very good to have to hear about that from like when I'm at that school every day and there was no communication about this project at all. I'm not saying that's like on you or even the developers or anything, but it didn't feel like a good way to like find out just last week and then see all these like renderings for the school that our kids attend. And when you have a child that goes to that school and you see like just townhouses where they play every day, it's an eyesore. It is taller. Like, so I guess to get to my question, is the roof line, I know you mentioned the framing, is the roof line actually taller than the school, like where it will like the actual roof would be? And what is the like square footage area around where the playground would be?
So Mike, can you tell her, first of all, the height of the buildings is compliant with the zoning bylaw for the property, and Mike will tell you exactly what the height is.
Yep, I'm just pulling that up here. I don't have it off the top of my head. So the current, so it's proposed as 10.44 meters in height. And that's measured, you know, per the zoning bylaw, which is to the center line of the slope roof.
And Robin, we can't hear you if you were just kind of going back and forth.
Is that taller than the school?
So for that, I would need to actually confirm because we don't have existing drawings of the school itself. It would be quite close to it from our initial analysis that we've done, but I don't have the height measurement of the school readily in my hand right now.
And like, so the owner of Vinci did send us like a map of like this L-shaped new like play yard that would be where it is right now. Like there's hardly any sun really like in that area. And we're just like some of us were wondering about like the sunlight. Like currently there's like the kids have like a garden and stuff like that in their yard, in their play area. What would the sunlight be? Like, would they, even if it's smaller, like, is it just going to be this like dark little shadowy thing? And then, yeah, actually, that's my last question.
So just to sort of, I can just for some technicalities, Peter, real quick. So the rear yard's of course proposed at 4.55 meters. And then the proposed severance line to the school is, I guess at the closest point is, what is that, 4.52 meters. So we're a little over 9 meters between the back of the building to the side of the school itself. And then as far as solar orientation, the east side of the school, which is the north side of the school, which is the Glen Avenue side. So the sun is actually rising on, as you guys know in the community, rising on, excuse me, I'm just orienting myself here. It's rising on the Quill Street side and of course setting at the school side. So there is a portion in the day, particularly during the summer solstice when the sun is higher up in the sky, where the majority, particularly lining up with probably when they're having their lunch hour, when the sun is highest in the day. There would be a lot of sunshine cast into this area. So I just wanted to add that in there.
And the townhouses, that's another question that was in the chat as well. Like 9 meters from the back of the townhouses, still the school. It's like 9 in between the two structures.
You got it.
Nine.
little-
So then
little over
there's
9
a
meters.
yard. Where does the yard come off? Like from the end of the properties at where the property cutoff is to the school? How much space is that? And is there going to be like privacy fencing or anything?
Yeah, there is fencing proposed between the rear yards and the school itself. Absolutely.
And what's the space like between the fence and the school?
The from the proposed building to the fence, it's going to be 4.55 meters, and then to the school at the closest point, it's 4.52. But that's to the projection at the side door. So if we actually look at the wall that's further back, that dimension is the closest one. Sorry, just bear with me. Looking at it here in real time, is 4.76 meters, which is the closest corner at the front of the school.
Thank you so much.
Is this is the site plan circulated to them as well? They can see these measurements. Can you hear me, Peter?
Oh, sorry.
I was asking if the site plan was circulated.
It forms part of the application that we made for the heritage. So if they've seen the heritage application, they should have seen the site plan, but we can circulate that and they can take a look at that. Because that will show you some of the, the space along the side of the building that is so it's not parking spaces. It's used to make it's used to meet the requirements of the Ministry of Education. Actually, it's not the Ministry of Education.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think Amanda has her hand raised next.
Thanks, Rawlson. So I live very close to the proposed development site, and so I had a chance to review all the documents that were sent out in advance of the meeting. And so it's very clear to me that the proposal does not include any alterations to the school itself. But I was, when I was reviewing the documents, kind of surprised that the heritage planning staff have sort of approved the heritage application without any recommendations, because to me, when you have a heritage building in your community, the greatest value in part comes from the aesthetic value of the building to the community, which the main vantage point of the school currently is from Quill Street. And so these townhomes will completely block the main view of the school from Quill Street. And so, I understand from what's been explained that the sight line that's being used in the application is basically from the corner of King George and Quill. But I sort of am calling that into question, I suppose, because the diagrams didn't include pictures of one of them actually does include fencing. And so I wonder, are we going to have to be looking over fencing and, kind of bending to look down and see the school? Like, it sort of seems unusual to me that, the building will essentially be blocked from view, but because the school itself isn't being touched in at least this current proposal, that it seems like it's likely that it could be approved, which to me sort of, I guess, renders heritage designation for buildings and communities a little bit meaningless. So I'm just wondering if there's a response to that. Or if that was, it's unfortunate that city staff aren't here to respond to this question, because I think it would be more so directed at them, unless, Rawlson, this is a question you're able to answer.
You can take it back to city staff, but I must say that, any planning rationale or heritage rationale is, in a sense, a balance. And so it doesn't preclude the fact that there is, directives for intensification within the municipality. And we've seen other school properties where there is infill. I think of a prominent example in New Edinburgh around the School of Dance. Ultimately, even the properties that were adjacent to the school on Glynn, as we know, used to be a part of the school field, and eventually infill development occurred. So it's a balance of probabilities, or a balance of interests, and one of the key interests, of course, that the municipality is pursuing at the directive of both the official plan, as well as we know provincial directives are intensification. And we know that intensification will occur in Overbook due to a large swath of the neighborhood being zoned R4, R5. So these are things that we have to keep in balance. But I'm of course pleased to take this back to Heritage staff for comment. They actually have created some answers to questions that the community association did provide. And before this presentation concludes, or this information session, I'll go through some of the answers that they had. They didn't address this specifically, but I'm pleased to take this back to staff for comment.
So, and I'll tell you, the rendering that showed the fencing, we debated that debated it quite significantly in that, but we fell on the side of once it could be the worst case scenario after a property is sold. Like, we may not install fencing like that, but we may sell it, but as a property owner can fence his property. So we wanted to present sort of what could be the worst case should a property like that be fenced. Now, there's the ability during a consent application to put conditions on the application, which sometimes we may be able to sort of prevent that worst case from happening, and we'll take that back and look at it. With respect to the heritage application, the heritage, what we're amending is the heritage statement. And if the heritage statement says that the view plane that's important is the one from the corner, then that's the statement that was the basis for the heritage application, and it's what we have to respect, and that is why we did what we did. The heritage attribution, the heritage statement didn't say that the most prominent important part was the look straight across at from Glynn across to the broad side of the school. In fact, quite the opposite. It said that the most important and prominent feature and the sightline to protect is the one looking at the front of the building. And as a result, that's what our application is based on. So.
If there are no more questions from Amanda, I see that Pam has her hand raised.
There we go. Thank you. I just think it's important for particularly those living on Glynn, to understand how the school is proposing to amend the play area. If it's an L-shaped playground, I'd like to understand to what extent that patch of grass on Glynn will be part of the main playground. The noise from that will have a significant impact on the houses. I live right beside the school. And I'd like to know also that alleyway between the school and the townhouses where I live, is that going to be amended? So I think that is really critical as part of this overall consideration. And I'd like that to be clearly laid out. Thank you.
Sorry, can you provide some a little more detail? The alleyway on the west side of the property?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're not, I don't think I'll look for Allison and Mike, but I don't think that.
No, I'm not. I'm not expecting for you to outline that. I'm sorry. This is more for Councillor King and the school, and I think there's one staff from the school on this call.
Yep.
And I think that is important to the neighborhood, and I think that's like a fair request from those living around the school to understand how they're planning to amend the property and how that will affect the noise levels. And I think we need to be really clear on that. Because that is part of the heritage property, is that the school yard was on that side of the school and it didn't affect the houses.
And I'm happy to take that ask back to staff who will deal directly with the owner. But you know, what's before us in terms of the heritage planning changes are more prescribed. Of course, there's still work that's being undertaken and it's dependent upon the heritage application before it goes before committee of adjustment. So, you know, there's still many moving parts to this.
But it does affect the use of the school building. This new development does affect the use of the school building. And I think that that's a key concern, is how will that school building be amended to be used as a school? And I think that needs to be really clear. Maybe the heritage proposal can go ahead, but in terms of the overall approval, I think that that's a really key concern, that this heritage building was designed in a certain way as part of the neighborhood. And by taking out, you know, a significant portion of the heritage area, I think that has a big impact on how the land is used around it and the use of the school. And I think that could impact the neighborhood.
It is important to note, and like I said, I'm happy to take this back to city staff for some comment, but it is important to note that the Heritage Act doesn't regulate use. So if an application ever comes in for the heritage building for a new use, staff considers the proposed changes against the heritage attributes, but we aren't telling landowners how to utilize their spaces. So it is important to keep that in mind, but I am definitely, concerned as a resident in the neighborhood and in close proximity, frankly, as most people know. So I have no problem advancing those questions to staff for follow-up.
Okay, thank you.
And I see that Danica has raised her hand.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, I guess like I'm grasping from this conversation that we won't be able to see there'll be some glimpses on the other streets of that building, but it sounds like the heritage laws that we have don't protect the view of the building. Or I heard like some versions of like not building by a meter. Peter was talking about earlier, changing the sight line, something, but I unless there's a clear picture, it's hard for me to understand what that actually means. Sometimes people do the renderings where you can see it like actually visualize from where on Quill you would actually be able to see the school. Otherwise, I'm kind of assuming we won't be able to see the school, and it's too bad because Overbook does not have a lot of heritage buildings and kind of nicer looking older buildings to make our neighborhood look a bit nicer. So that's like one that we just kind of are losing through this process. And you guys are developers, like you've been hired to do this. You're not the decision makers on this. So it is what it is. And we'll see, I guess, what happens at Heritage. And I'm learning more about the Heritage and what it does and does not protect. I'm wondering two things, or maybe three things. A few people in the comments have asked if you can actually show us, like go back to the renderings and show us what is the space that will be like that meets the ministry's criteria for schoolyard. I feel like no one's calling it a schoolyard, but like go ahead, and I'll come back with the other questions then.
Okay, so it's actually the ministry doesn't regulate the schoolyard, but it's the requirements for preschool programs that actually prescribe area spaces and play spaces. So in that regard, you have to provide 5.6 square meters of open space per per pupil to of an outdoor play area. So you know, and it all depends on how many students you have that are that you define that area. So similar to what you would find in any of the childcare areas. So if you look at schools that have childcare facilities associated with them, they often have a fenced play area, and that play area is to accommodate their licensed capacity at 5.6 square meters per student. So that's the ministry guidelines that Vinci would have to meet at that time. So, you know, and how they meet that is, you know, it has to be fenced, and there's a number of sort of minor aesthetic criteria, but nothing that says, you know, it has to be grass, it has to be, you know, X, it has to be Y, a hard surface versus soft surface. So, but we're going to be going back to the school and saying to them, okay, because it's not part of what those play areas look like and how they meet the ministry guidelines, not necessarily part of our application, other than to say they can be met, and you know, a simple mathematical, you know, here's an area, it's 5 meters by 50 meters. You can accommodate, according to the ministry guidelines, 40 students in that area. Now, what that area looks like, sand versus hard surface versus soft surface, we'll go back to the school and we'll talk to them about how they can putting together something that they can distribute to parents to kind of outline how that will look. Because I'm understanding that that's sort of part of the requirements that the community is looking for. So, or at least the parents who have children in the school.
So, thank you. Is it not possible to show us the drawing and show us where? I know I am understanding that you didn't like draw in a schoolyard in there, but you're saying
Sure.
that there is space.
But let's go back to we can. So if you look on this, if you look on the other side of the, you look on the other side of, go right to the back. Okay, if you go to the urban townhouse one, no, in the first couple of slides. So back one more. So if you look at that area on the east side that runs from, and if you zoom in, you'll see that that's a fenced area. If you just took that side of the school, you know, not even the bump out, that would provide enough open space to meet the ministry guidelines. I'm not saying it's what people want. It's what meets the ministry guidelines. For you could accommodate with that area 40 preschool students. So that would meet the ministry guidelines. Now, I'm not saying that it would meet your standards as a parent or as a person who would want to go to the school, but that would meet the ministry guidelines.
So you're talking about that space kind of between the two buildings, like where the school goes in?
So I'm talking about the south side of the building.
Yeah.
Or not the south side, the east side of the building. So the backyards of the townhouses, you see there's a severance line. Take that side of the building from the front to the rear, and you have enough area to meet the ministry guidelines for approximately 40 preschool students.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for, I mean, I understand that this isn't formally part of the proposal. You're just saying theoretically there would be space here.
Yes.
Okay. And so, just because there were a lot of questions in the chat, theorizing where the space would be. So that's partly why I bring it up. And then, so my two other questions, one is for Rawlson, and I don't know if this is something you can specifically answer, but Like one of the things we're hearing tonight is the concern generally for the offering of childcare. Like I think people see this as step one of losing childcare in this space. And so it's unfortunate we don't know what Vinci's long-term plans are. But I'm guessing for you as a counselor, that's a concern to make sure that those services exist in this neighborhood. So I don't know, there's no law to my knowledge that protects like the offering of childcare. Perhaps there should be, but I'm guessing that's on your radar. So if you have
Yeah,
comments.
that would have to be a discussion with the owner and the operator as to what their intentions are in terms of the services that they offer. From a political standpoint, of course, we're always advocating for childcare, and we've been actually pleased that we've seen a number of new childcare spaces open up in the ward generally, primarily in Manor Park. But we're going to continue to pursue that across all neighborhoods. But once again, you know, this is a private Montessori school that is offering specific services, and it would be obviously incumbent upon the school to speak to the services that they're going to offer. But as a political imperative, we are talking with community members all the time about expanding childcare throughout all our neighborhoods. And we even late last year had a conversation with Minister Suds about that. So we're going to continue to advocate, but of course, you know, we don't have unilateral control, especially at the municipal level, over who offers what, especially if they are private concerns offering those services. Just to also address the fact that there are a number of questions in the chat, we'd love to basically pose some of those questions, obviously, to the applicant team before they disappear. So I see that two other people have raised their hands, but they've had one round of questions. So I just wanted to do a quick, quick speed round of questions, at least for the applicant team, so that we can ensure that some of those questions are answered. And I see Michelle has from my staff has raised her hand.
Yes, sorry. Councillor Sheila Perry is trying to raise her hand, and the function is not working. So I've raised my hand for Sheila.
Okay.
So I just wanted to flag that. I knew you would call on me immediately. I was trying to find the right time.
No, that's perfect. So maybe we'll go to Sheila since she hasn't had an opportunity to pose a question, and then we'll pose some of the written questions in the chat to the applicant team.
Okay, I'm going to unmute Sheila. Just give me a second.
Thank you. Okay. That works. Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation. I'm certainly glad I saw this through neighbors identifying, and I think that's the big thing. You've got a number of people around this area who are quite concerned for various reasons. And I've lived in Overbook for a number of years. And heritage is really, really important in this community because we've lost so much. And as you know, we're in transition. I know Peter understands that from planning and all. And, having this particular school identified is extremely important to hold that. That being said, I also understand and see the direction, certainly from the province, locally, for densification. And there's no doubt about it. We're seeing that here in this community. Down comes one bungalow and up goes minimum 2 or plus. So that being said, a couple of things strike me here. I'm really disappointed that the owner isn't here, so we have a sense of what she wants or Vinci wants to do in the long term here, because the development of the property, we've seen it, as Councillor has mentioned. I mean, we see it over in New Edinburgh. We've seen it in other schools where they're heritage buildings and there can be some retrofits of some sort. But it's extremely important to me to know, and I think for a number of people, to know what the future is here from the owner. And I certainly empathize with the parents in this case, because you want your kids to have a great spot, and playground is part of that. So the question was asked about the spacing. I don't have those figures in front of me, but that is a huge issue. Light is an issue. The design, a couple of quickie comments on that. The bricking, I think, is appropriate to keep that as close as possible. Fencing that's very sensitive, but again, keeping the space for the area for the kids, and parking is another huge big one. So I don't know if you could comment maybe on the parking on this, because we see that for the 8 units, but I hazard to guess it's going to be tricky for any staff and the overflow to the neighborhood. And I will try 2 other little quickie comments here if I may. It's more on design, since I know we have the design people here on call. It's a huge amount of glassing on those townhouses proposed, and I'm sensitive to the bird population and also to how that may impact, and the sun obviously effect for the school and any blocking from the height. So I packed a few comments in there. I hope maybe you can help identify a few of the things, specifically the parking for the area and the overflow. Thanks.
So,
Well, I can, maybe I'll let you go first, Peter.
well,
and
I
then
was just going to say, both the severed parcels and the retained parcel have to be zoning compliant. So we would have to demonstrate that we have parking that meets the zoning bylaw, and that's the standard to which we're held. And as of right now, I think that we believe that we meet the requirements of the zoning bylaw with respect to parking for the school.
Yeah, thank you for that. I was going to mimic that, those words in terms of the appropriate zoning. And obviously, that's something that will be reviewed when it goes to a committee of adjustment as well. It's also important to note that as part of the heritage application, of course, traffic and parking are not factors, as we know, in terms of the alteration of the property as designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. So those would be discussions that would be continuing at Committee of Adjustment. But in terms of just traffic generally, we would be interested in the potential impacts to traffic. And as you might know, the councillor's offices have a direct control over temporary traffic calming measures budget. And so we continue to work with residents on the impacts of traffic in the community. So, as we hear about parking, as we hear about the number of vehicles that would be in those proposed properties, we would be monitoring and ascertaining whether any traffic calming measures would need to be put into place. And if there are no other comments from Sheila, I just wanted to do a lightning round in a sense of the questions that we obtained in the meeting chat for the applicant team. So Amanda, who did comment, asked, since the proposed townhouses will not have in-ground basements, what is the height difference between the school and the homes? The diagram makes it appear as though the homes will be taller than the school.
I think, Mike, I'm going to have to ask Mike. I think they do have basements, though. Mike, am I?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, these definitely have basements.
Yeah, and we'll get the height of the school, and we'll get the height of the buildings, and we'll circulate that to you, Councillor, if that's a concern. But we're zoning, and again, the test for us is, are we zoning compliant? And from a height perspective, we are zoning compliant, but we will tell you what that is as it relates to the school.
Okay, and this might be in the same vein, and this is another question that Amanda had posed. Is the line of view from the corner of King George and Quill, assuming there is no fence line around the rear yards of the proposed homes, blocking the view of the school?
I think it's I don't know, to be honest with you. We did do some view plane work, and I'll talk to Mike, and we'll get that. We'll get you the view plane and where it sits so that you can see it. It was more the view plane was really not the corner of the building, but the entrance feature. So we'll look at that and get that to you, Councillor.
I appreciate that. Judith asked, a 3-story building will block the light for the children at the school. All those windows facing the school could disrupt their privacy as well. Will 9 meters from their yard, will it be 9 meters from their yard or the school building?
School building.
Okay. And this is probably, I figure you might not be able to answer this because it deals with the intent of the owner. But one of the questions is, will the current Vincy school in the building be viable without a playground? If not, what are Vincy's longer term plans for the former Overbook school?
We don't know. We'll take that back to the owner and see if we can get you an answer.
Okay. Another question from Roger. Where does the project team Vincy envision parking for current school staff and workers / clients of other organizations leasing space in the former Overbook school?
There are a number of parking spaces identified, I think, Mike, on the west side of the building and in the rear yard, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, the west side of the building and the north side of the building. It's actually the existing parking that's there. Those are effectively untouched.
I'm just seeking more questions. Shauna asks, can someone please clarify the length of the path of the laneways? How many cars can park in a laneway?
On the west side, I'm assuming. Mike?
Or is she referring to the units that we're
the units
building and
themselves. Yep.
Yeah, the units that we're building, how long are our proposed driveways? I believe we can fit 2 cars.
Yeah, so to the property line, if we're measuring from where the garage starts to the property line, now a couple of these lots, the Quill Street property line is on a slight angle, so they're all slightly, very minutely different from one another. But just so we have a number here, it's 6.35 meters
from the property line to the garage.
To the garage, yeah, and obviously it's even further if we take that measurement to the edge of the asphalt.
Right, and so just for
the concrete sidewalk.
Yeah, and just for context, parking space is 5.2 meters long by 2.6 meters wide. Yeah. So in reality, we would have 2 parking spaces, one in the garage and one in the laneway. But I should note the city actually, part of their official plan, looks to provide, the direction is for less parking. So we're trying to find the right balance here for these units.
Here's another question, probably to take back to the owner. Where will the children play while construction is ongoing? Will they be forced to play inside during all of the construction time? And how long will the construction period be? So I am imagining that's a...
Yeah, we don't know, and we'll take back the where they're going to play and how are they going to make that work. But we're a long way right now from building permit, so I can't tell you what the construction schedule is going to be or how that's going to work.
And I guess this is probably another question for the owner's consideration. Will there be any noise restrictions during school hours, or can residents play any type of music that they wish, be it loud or obscene? Actually, I don't know the context of that specific question.
Well, these units would be subject to the same requirements that the units on the west side of the school and the units that face onto the school. So whatever those rules are, would be the rules for these new units.
And somebody's asking a technical question. They're saying that there is no sanitation connection. Quill only has a storm sewer. Won't the tie-ins have to be on the King, George, or Glen lines? If so, does this mean a lengthy road excavation along the entire frontage of the community center?
So good question, and it's we think we'll most likely have to build a sewer along the frontage of the units to tie in to the services on either side. So we'll actually be building a sewer to link in to the ones on either side. But that we're still working through those technicalities, but that's looking like what the option would be.
Okay. The next question is, what is the estimated price point for one of these units, and what is the rental income potential?
So right now, these are ownership, and I don't know, Allison, or Mike, if we've actually ever, put a market value on them.
No, at this stage, we definitely don't know that, because the builder, again, these aren't at construction drawing stage, so there's probably no specifications set for them as far as the level of finish. So we have no sense of what the builder is going to be charging for these.
And one of the next questions from Anna, for the minimum outdoor space, isn't the 5.6 meter per student of outdoor space requirement per licensed child? And Vinci is licensed for 99 children, not the approximately 45 children example discussed today, and explaining the outdoor space is sufficient? Or is it the case that there is sufficient outdoor space for 99 children, unless the 99 number is incorrect, but that comes from the Vinci profile on the early years site at the Ministry of Education?
Yeah, so all that we can advise you is that Vinci has advised us that the space would meet the ministry's requirements. We'll go back to them and see what the requirements are, but we understand that there is enough space to meet them. So I've never heard the 99 number, so that's not something that we've been privy to, but we'll go back to them.
Sure. One of the next questions is snow removal. So just asking about that prospect.
So each individual unit owner will be required to remove his snow, and the Vinci, I'm not sure how snow removal is undertaken with respect to the Vinci property right now, but it would remain as it is today. And that may not be very good depending on the prospect you have, the perspective you have. So.
And then one of the last questions is, what are the next steps for the permit approval process and rough timelines? And reiterating that we would like another meeting with Vinci as well to hear about their short-term and long-term plans.
So we're going to Heritage Committee next week, City Council following. We haven't made applications to the Committee of Adjustment. I mean, we still have some work to do. So I would suspect they're imminent by the end of February or the end of January, early February. We'll be making those applications for our hearing dates in March, I would suspect. And we will go back to Vinci and say, you've got to have a discussion about your property and how you meet the ministry guidelines and what those spaces are going to be. I'm sure parents, I know, I'm reading the chat too, that they have their, regardless of what meets the ministry space guidelines, parents have definite opinions on it shouldn't be there, it should be somewhere else, or it should not be somewhere else. So, and that's really a Vinci question.
Yeah, and then the one of the last questions that was posed to me is whether I'll organize another meeting where all questions about the proposal can be discussed, including those that fall outside of the purview of the Built Heritage Committee. Actually, it's not my intention to hold another meeting, and that's because this would fall under the purview of Committee of Adjustment, and that is an independent jurisdiction. This doesn't come to council. Councilors actually, unless it's a question of fair process at the Committee of Adjustment, does not interfere with Committee of Adjustment decisions. We had decided to hold this meeting because of community concern, also at the behest of the Community Association, because there were questions about the process. But we wanted to outline the process very clearly. When this comes to heritage, the discussion will be about the amendments to the heritage attributes. It won't be dealing with the planning aspects or the traffic aspects or the infrastructure aspects. And then when it goes to Committee of Adjustment, there's a process there where residents can obviously provide input and have delegations, but that's before a separate body that deals with the consent applications as well as the minor variances. So I thought it would be important for people to understand the process, and also for us to be able to collect comments that we could take back to staff. As well as implore the applicants, the owner, to probably be more involved in the process in terms of answering questions in terms of the community and frankly the students who attend the school. But it's also important to note that staff under the Heritage Act do not have to hold a public meeting. It's like I said, they would have attended if they had availability, which I actually appreciate, but they did not. Heritage staff did not have that availability this evening. But under the Heritage Act, they're not compelled per se to hold a public session. So this session was at the behest of the community, and as everybody knows, I'm for greater transparency in the planning and heritage process. So I thought it would be important for people to understand what is being proposed and how the different tools work at the committee, at council, and at the Committee of Adjustment, and to ensure that you have the opportunity to provide comments. It's also important to have the planning application team here to take all these comments back, because at this process, often what I do find is that there is some back and forth between community to address community concerns, whether those come directly from residents or the Community Association, to see some changes to and adjustments to what might be proposed.
So, Councillor, we'll endeavor to go back and talk with the owners. We've certainly heard people and their concerns about the school and how the school will function. It's not particularly a sort of a question about the townhouses, more about how they're going to meet their ministry obligations and their community obligations to the parents that they serve. And we'll go back and talk to them about how we will or how they want to engage with the broader community. So, as I said, we haven't made our successive applications yet, and so there is some time to go back and talk to the owners about addressing some of the broader concerns.
Excellent. Yeah, that would be my expectation. And one of the reasons why we called this information session was to ensure that there would be that relay of information to the owner. But I would encourage, obviously, residents to continue to provide inputs. If you do have comments that you would like to make concerning the heritage application around the amendment to the designation. We did leave in the presentation some contact information for the committee coordinator. So we would invite you to provide those comments to the committee. If you don't get those comments to the committee in time, there's always the opportunity to also provide those comments to council. who would be considering this item on the 24th as well. And of course, if it is approved by the Heritage Committee, then the process, at the applicant's will to submit the application before the committee for adjustment, that sets off its own public consultation process, which you'd be able to engage in as well, which frankly will get into more of the nitty gritty around the way that the development would be undertaken, and those other elements. And I'm just reviewing to see if there are any last questions. And there is one about, was there information about a separate application for 21 units? There were comments in the chat, and I'd like and appreciate some clarification.
I can touch on this one. Mike and I were just chatting because we have been seeing the chat. At one point on a site plan, we did a zoning overview on the property as to what is permitted, and under the present zoning, an apartment building with a maximum of 21 units could be permitted, but that's the property that we're proposing 8 townhomes. So there's no other application that we are aware of than the 8 townhomes we're talking to you about today.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. And it's something that I like to emphasize, that with existing zoning, there's higher density in Overbook. And often, I know that there was comment about seeing tear downs of bungalows and intensification projects around apartment buildings. We just want to be very clear that under the existing zoning through the majority of Overbook, between Vanier Parkway and St. Laurent, that type of development is permissible, and often without even going to a committee of adjustment. Often that is potentially can be undertaken through site plan. So it's important to note that a lot of the existing zoning in Overbook is geared to a greater amount of intensification, and due to the challenges around housing, accessibility, affordability, the number of the lack of available inventory, there is the continued potential for increased intensification in our neighborhood under the existing zoning laws, existing zoning bylaws and rules, frankly, without many of these applications going directly to council. So it's just important to note that. I'd like to be just very realistic about the situation in Overbook, but it's important to note that in this scenario, there is some greater oversight because of the need for an amendment, and that does impact elements such as the design of the property that is proposed, unlike other developments that you might see in Overbook, where the inputs are a little bit more minimal, and in fact, frankly, can be more minimal because of the changes that the province has undertaken around site plan control, and ensuring that the full delegation of site plan control now lies with city staff. So just wanted to kind of talk about the development environment out there, but I'm appreciative of residents' concerns, and we will ensure that all comments are relayed to the applicant and staff. And then maybe the last question concerns the impacts on the trees that are currently on the property, and how they might be impacted with the proposed development.
Allison, we have to provide a tree information report. We have to catalog all the trees on the site and their conditions, do we not?
Yeah, we did, and that would be required for our committee of adjustment application. So as Peter noted, we had an arborist out on site reviewing all the trees. Anything larger than 30 centimeters as of right now, I believe, in diameter would be protected. And if it were to be removed, we would have to provide appropriate compensation. I don't believe there was any off the top of my head. that were greater than that size. And our proposed development does include some additional plantings as well.
And the last written question that I'll provide to you is the application contingent on the property being severed?
No.
So
Sorry, where is that? Oh, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Peter.
So are you saying can we build the townhouses without severing the property off? Yeah,
That's how I'm interpreting the question.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to look at it. That would be a planned unit development. And we'd have to look at the zoning to see if planned unit developments are allowed. You can't usually have two buildings on a property unless you're allowed, unless a planned unit development is permitted. So, and we'd have to look at that. But I'm pretty sure that we have to sever off the property to allow the townhouses to be constructed. But we'll look at that, and we'll certainly be able to have an answer. But I'm pretty sure we have to.
Thank you for that. And then just before we close out this meeting, I just wanted to note, number one, that there were, I believe, 2 hands that were raised. So before we jumped to the written questions, so I don't know if the questions that had been asked were satisfied. I'm assuming they have been, since I don't see those hands being raised again. So if that's the case, we wanted to note that obviously we're still open to receiving inputs on the heritage application. Once the that goes through its process at committee, if it's approved or disapproved, it would go to council, and then there would be an opportunity for the applicant to come in with their application to Committee of Adjustment, and the community would be informed about the process to provide inputs into that process at that time. It's important to note that this would be a staggered process. And the first item is the heritage application. If you have comments specific to the heritage application, we invite you to contact the committee coordinator, who would be able to provide those written comments, or who would be able to provide you an opportunity to delegate in front of the Built Heritage Committee. Apart from that, I don't see any other questions. What we will also do is ensure that all of the written questions that are in the chat are relayed to the applicant team, and therefore to the owner for input. And we will also encourage the applicant team to relay to the owner that many community members, as well as parents at the school, would love to have a more direct conversation about the intents around development and around the services that are going to be offered at the school.
We've heard them, Councillor.
Yeah, and of course we're just going to ensure that you have that written copy.
Absolutely, we appreciate that.
So we appreciate everybody taking time out of their busy schedules to be here. And we will continue to, if there has been correspondence with my office or correspondence with the coordinator, we will ensure with the committee coordinator for the Built Heritage Committee, we will ensure that you are able to participate in the public process of the heritage elements. And we are happy to assist you with the planning elements. But once again, and I'll just reiterate this, this is not coming to council, so this is going to be deliberated. The planning elements will be deliberated by a separate body. As a city councillor, I'm generally prohibited from really participating in that process, unless there is an issue of process. If you feel that the process has not been fair, then where we have some capacity is to write a letter to the chair of the Committee of Adjustment, but this is under the jurisdiction of the Committee of Adjustment, and we just wanted to be very clear about that. If you also have other concerns, I invite you to work not just through our office, but also through the Overbook Community Association, which has an excellent planning committee and who is very active in terms of providing input on files. So I would also suggest you work with Nora and Stephen at the OCA, as well as Danica, to ensure that comments are also relayed through the community association. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time, and we will be following up as well with the community association, where we did receive some answers to questions that had been posed by staff.
Good night. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.